So here is my, that's the name of my business. I'm clicking, turn it that way, boom. Okay, so disclaimer, I'm a lawyer. Yeah, sure, I'm looking for business, but today is not legal advice to you. It's informational. It's also not tax advice. We do have a tax presentation and things of that nature coming up along with marketing. And so you're encouraged to seek advice from your own legal counsel and a financial person, whoever that may be. So we're assuming today, since most of you are here because you may have registered a business, as Patrick talked about, that you may already have a business registered, so I'm not going to talk about that. Although I do have a seminar on that as well. And you've got at least some idea of what business you might like to be in, and if you don't have to leave, that's okay. And we also assume you don't know everything. I don't know everything either, I wish I did, and that you wish to learn more about specific issues. So am I generally right on my assumptions? Okay. So those are the assumptions. So some terms I'll probably use today. We'll talk about the business plan, obviously. And I'll talk about what I think that is. Minnesota Secretary of State, who I talked to today in person, the new Secretary of State. An entity is a thing like a corporation, LLC, the new Public Benefit Corporation, which you may not have heard of. It just started. With financials are, your pro forma or whatever financial stuff you put in your plan. Real or imagined, and then intellectual property are things that are very important to a lot of us, more and more every day. Trademarks, copyrights, trade names, domain names, and like that. So, a business plan is what we're going to talk about today. Should everyone have one? I think so, and even if you don't have one written, you probably have one in your head. So what is it? Well, I think it's a tangible set of writings. So goals, implementation, plans, standards, hopes, and visions. And this is very important to me, is that it gets answers now to things that you will fall over anyway. So you think about it now, and it's a painful experience perhaps, but the way I help people with it is I kind of draw it out like as if I were their psychologist to some degree, because it's not my plan, it's your plan, and it's way in the back of your brain somewhere. So we try to draw that out, put sense to it, because later you'll have to fall over those anyway, and you'll go, oh my God, I never thought of this, and I got to do it. Now I'm in business and I'm busy because I got customers coming in, but now I don't have time to plan. So if you plan at the beginning, I think it helps you. And that's why it's a powerful tool. So who needs it? I don't know. Maybe you don't need it. If you're going to Vegas and put all your money on red, good for you. But we can reduce risk, I think, by planning ahead. So why do you need it? Here's some of the reasons why you need a plan, and we'll talk about those. Okay, so it depends on what your time's worth. Now, if your time's not worth anything because you're like a hobo, good for you. But to do it in the beginning and to spend a few bucks maybe if you need to, or use your time now while perhaps you're not fully engaged in your business, your time may be worth less because you don't have money coming in that you need to deal with or customers or whatever, whereas later you will. So when I did my business plan, before my business was fully up and running, and I was very happy to do it because then I didn't have to think about everything when I actually did have business. And business will come to you if you have some kind of a business and you put yourself out there properly. So so I suggest it's a good thing to do. And you don't have to, but you should. Kind of annoying. So some planning considerations. So we ask a lot of questions in the business plan, and if you have that sheet I gave you, we answer questions for your own business, and that's what you should do if you do your own business plan or have somebody else do some or all of it. So why do you want to be in business? I don't know, but we need to answer that. Maybe you want to change your lifestyle. We call that a lifestyle business. Maybe you want to make money. Maybe you want to augment your income. Who knows? Maybe you're dying to be in business and no one can stop you. Great. So what business do you want to be in? We'll talk about that. How are you going to finance it? Almost any business needs some kind of way to finance it, and this is an issue. A lot of people go to their mother, father, rich uncle. Great. If they've got the money and they want to finance you, could be good. Some people want to go to a bank. We've got at least one fine banker here. They'd like to know if this thing is going to fly before they give you tons of money to risk. Business plan helps with that. How are you going to get business in? This is always a concern. It's a concern for me. I've got a bunch of clients, but I never know when the last one's coming through the door, and I get nervous. So we have to make sure we have a plan for that, and that takes you to marketing. So, and if you have multiple owners, what about all those people? Nothing's worse than a crazy partner. So we need to talk about those and how we're going to divide it up and how we're going to set up a set of rules for each other. So even more questions. Who's the competition? This one's really important to me. Why should anyone buy from you? We got restaurants all over the place. Some of them go broke, some of them last for years. Somebody opens up another one in the space where the 5 other restaurants have died. It's possible to open a restaurant and cater to a clientele and go on. But maybe nobody wants to buy from you and they'll go across the street. So we have to talk about that. How much can you charge? Now if I'm selling apples, how much am I going to sell my apples for if I want to make $100,000 a year? Well, I can sell them for $100,000 and sell 1 apple. I'm done. Well, that's not going to work. So, but it's a good idea. How will you know if you're successful? Really important. So if you've been in a business for 5 years and it's slogging along, are you successful? Well, I don't know. But you should set up some parameters so when you get there, you don't have to feel terrible. You might be able to feel good because, boy, you reach some of your goals, but not all. What are the risks and how do you protect them? See if I can go forward. And then very importantly, Mr. Leander, where is he? Hey, he's going to speak third. When I met with him some years ago about my idea to do business planning as part of my business, he said, well, I think it's really important that you talk about how to implement the plan. So I put that in deference to him. And it's important because if you've got a plan and you throw it up on the high shelf and it sits there, it's not going to work. It's not going to help you. So you can have a plan that can do many things for you, and you should. And it's a little bit painful to have to keep going back and looking at it and actually read it and actually do what you said you were going to do. But it's very helpful. So 7 essentials of a successful business plan. We'll talk about them briefly. So it gives you some direction, research and analysis, everything you're going to do, market intelligence, which you'll talk about, financial forecast, where are we going to go, how much are we going to make, what are our expenses, what are they going to be in the future. Otherwise, it can easily bring us down. Focus on what's important. You have a business, you got many balls in the air. At the end of the day, it'd be nice if you could retire to your office, wherever that would be, in the basement of your restaurant or in the 50th floor of the IDS. Focus on what's important. Did you make your goals today, this week, next year? Flexibility. Plan is not chiseled in stone. You got to change it like a ship. So if you're sailing and you're heading for the rocks, that's bad. So we want to steer it off this way before we get there, because you're going to hit the rocks if you don't. And then fundability. How are you going to fund all this thing? The banker would like to lend you money because he makes money off lending money. And then you'd like to take the money and make even more off it. Moving forward. So pretty obviously talking about direction. So I equate this to a road map, which they still exist, or GPS. So it's a detailed road map showing you how to arrive at your business goals. So you might say, I don't need a plan, I just have an idea, I'm going to sell apples, I'm going to sell whatever, and we're going to put them out on the street corner, and people are going to drive by and they're going to buy them, and I'm going to make a lot of money. Could be. Or maybe not. If your business is much more complicated, it probably would be a good idea for you to decide exactly what it is you're trying to achieve and then know when you get there, as if a roadmap. So we do an in-depth review of everything about the business, operational, legal, technological, and financial. So I used to work for a large bank, the name of which you might know if I told you, Wells Fargo. And the clients would call, I was in the law department, and they'd say, we want to do this deal and whatever. And I'd say, great. And I'd say, we want to wire money. Part of this thing is we want to wire money to people in X location in Hong Kong at 2 in the morning. Okay, fine. I think you can do that. But have you checked to see if the wire department is even open at 2 in the morning? That's operational. So these are things you have to ask about. So those are some of the things that you want to do in addition to finding out all these other things, and we'll talk about those. Market intelligence, which you'll talk about, is huge. So you got to do this. And when I think this is the longest part of a business plan. It is for me. You can keep, when I tried to figure out who does what I do, I found one company in the United States. I mean, I'm a lawyer, there's tons of those, but a lawyer that does a business plan and also like nonprofit and some other things, there's only one. So I only had one person to compare it to, and he's in some other state. So I had to break it down into subgroups. Look at some lawyers, what do they do? Why should people buy from me instead of them? I had to find out about the business planner. What does he do? How can I say I'm different, and why should you buy from me? And is the market going to support this? Does anybody want the business plan, and will they pay? And who are they? Good idea to find out. And we do that. And then the financial projections. So I'm sure you'll talk about this, but we're talking about all the expenses, all the revenues. You got to pay taxes in this world. And then bottom line, how much does the business make? How much do you make, salaries or otherwise, etc. So, and then focus. So what are your goals? You should be able to articulate a few. So if you don't know your goals, you won't reach them. And if you do reach them, you won't know when you get there. And it's very satisfying, I think, to reach a goal, and you say, yay, and have some champagne or whatever. And then, of course, you set a new goal, and you can do it again. And then you get to drink more champagne. And it keeps you from being sidetracked. Some people don't like the details of a business, okay? Some people, that's all they like. So if you're always hooked up in the milieu of it all, and customers are getting ticked off because you're not there, because you're messing around with details, you're going to go broke. So you have to focus on what's important if you want to keep this business running. And then flexibility. If the plan's not working or you're not reaching your goals, you want to tweak it. That's the way the ship works. That's the way a lot of businesses have to work. Market changes, customer tastes change, what have you. I mean, booksellers are disappearing off the planet, but they would have gone off, they would have died off earlier if they hadn't changed the business. You know, let's do, you know, Nook and Kindle and all that stuff and try to last a little longer in our bookstore. Things of that nature. And then fundability. You got to have money. A banker would most likely like to see a plan or else at least a lot of personal guarantees before they lend you money because they want to get it back someday with interest. So what's the anatomy of a business plan? So you have that laid out there. That is a typical one. If you're already in business, you don't need to talk about entry. But if you're not, we have to talk about how you're going to get in. So these are some of the areas, and we tailor that to what you need. So what I usually do is, because that's my goal, set up a skeleton of what we're trying to achieve, what we're looking at, and then answer the questions and write it in a reasonable fashion so that the audience for the plan, and we need to know who that is, it might be banker, venture capitalist, might be you want some partners, it might even be customers, who knows? So we need to know that at the outset when we write the plan. So all these things are geared towards hitting that target. So if I mention, I'm probably going to go all over the place, but if I talk about a business, I'm just going to talk about Acme Gizmos and services. I used to use widgets, but now there are widgets, and there's much fewer gizmos. So we'll talk about Acme Gizmos. A plan can be 100 pages long. That's nice. Nobody is going to read it. You should read it, and the process of putting it together is important for all the reasons I talked about. But the executive, be it banker or whoever, is going to want to see the executive summary and probably the financials. They look at the financials, and whatever you put on them, they're going to cut it in half because the rest of it is unbelievable in any case, usually. But what they want to see is this plan, is this executive summary. So a couple of pages that summarizes the whole thing. Now you really can't do the summary unless you do the whole plan. So you do the plan, and then part of the process, you summarize it for you, for everybody else. And then take advice on your plan. I put that in here because it didn't fit anywhere else. You know, seek advice and then take it. I know a lot of people, you know, I give advice and people pay me money, but then they don't take it, which is fine, that's their prerogative. But then they do stupid stuff. So my advice isn't always perfect, You know, so get advice from other people, decide how it fits into your plan, and then take it. And if you do this plan, don't leave the summary out, because otherwise people are going to go, oh, this thing hurts to look at. So, executive summary. So, another thing, the first section of your plan, introduction, vision, mission. Oftentimes I do that last, just before the executive summary, but you do need to know what's going on. So if you're a nonprofit, which we assume you're not, that's not the audience, they always have a mission statement, but you should have one too if you're in business. What is it? What are we trying to do? Okay? Because when somebody reads it, they go, oh, that's cool. And they want to, you know, it's sort of like a news story. So you have to be somewhat of a journalist here. This is an audience that you're trying to reach. Tell them what you want to do, what are we trying to do, what's so good about this, why should you do whatever it is we're asking you to do, give us money, join up, buy from us. Rah, rah. So barriers to entry. So this is very important. So if you go into business, what do you need to do to get into business? Now if you're going to be in the nuclear power business, there's a lot of barriers to entry, okay? There's you know, you need a lot of resources there and a lot of money and some place to build it. So that's not so good. If you're a consultant, perhaps all you need is your card case. But, and it varies in between. Okay, so we need to look at that. It might be money as a barrier to entry, it might be a license. Who knows? Financing is always important. And you got to ask yourself, why doesn't everyone do this business if it's so great? You know, I have an idea for I don't, but if I have an idea for a flying bicycle, sounds good to me. Well, why doesn't everyone do it? I don't know. Let's find out. Maybe it's impossible, at least under the current situation, or maybe nobody wants it. Services description is very important, or product. So if you don't know what you're selling, that's a problem. And I like to make it succinct. So when I have several what I call shelf facings, because I used to be in the grocery business, among other things. And so what am I selling? It's like a can of soup on the shelf. I'm selling this and this and this and this and this. So I should be able to articulate it. And if one of them is not selling, why not? Maybe nobody wants it. Maybe I got bad marketing. Maybe it's too expensive. I have to deal with it. So what am I selling? And he'll talk about the market description. But we need to know who's the target market for this and what's the critical needs. You know, who needs it? If nobody needs it, nobody's going to buy it. It might be nice to you, might not be nice to them. So it's painful, but we've got to look at the market. We've got to find out who wants this, why, what are they willing to pay, what type of thing do they want, okay? Not obvious to a lot of people. They just go out there and start shotgunning. And you may hit something, but you might not. You might hit the wrong thing. And if you don't have what you need, you're screwed. So organizational structure. So what kind of a business are we going to have? Now we have we had laws in the state and everywhere else. And so you select your entity based on a number of things. Tax issues, liability protection, whatever. There may be filings you got to do with the Secretary of State or some other regulatory organization. You have to research those. How are you going to run this thing? You going to run it because you're king or queen? Great, good for you. Maybe you're part of a board of directors. How does that going to work? And then we have agreements among the owners. Who can buy in? Who can sell? What happens if you die and you've got 5 owners? Does their piece go to their spouse and then the spouse comes on the board and they're crazy? Not good. So we have an agreement in advance as to how that all handles, who gets what payoff, when, how much the price of their stock is. You know, it's not on the stock exchange in most of the stuff I do, so it's a private situation. And licensing issues. If you're going to be a chiropractor, you probably need a license. So these are some things you have to look at. If you're going to be a daycare provider, you need a license. So those are things we have to look at. If you go into business, you don't have all the proper stuff, somebody's going to come knocking on your door sooner or later and say, hey, you're you're illegal. I won't go into this. Financial analysis is quite important. It doesn't have to be hugely complicated, but it's got to be there. And then that's our third speaker. So some financial oversight items. So in addition to this, you know, not just a bunch of numbers, but how are we going to run this business? Who's going to keep our books? Is it going to be you? good if you're a nice bookkeeper. If not, you can hire somebody. They're pretty cheap. Security and cyber control now is hugely important. Everything's going to the cloud or not, or it's floating around, or it's on a flash drive. You need to be careful of that, because otherwise you'll get in the paper like Target and it could hurt your business. And if you're in places like California, you'll have to report that you've been hacked, and it's a big mess and it costs a lot of money. How are you going to pay your bills? What kind of bank accounts are you going to have, and with whom? You got to keep track of your revenue. Who's going to make your deposits and when? If you give all your cash to Jonesy to deposit, it might never get in. Okay, like in It's a Wonderful Life. The guy goes to deposit money and he never gets there. Everything goes to hell. Tax issues, you got to pay your taxes. So who's going to prepare your taxes? You know, the idea is you have to pay as few taxes as you have to pay, but you can't usually pay no taxes unless you make no money. So you've also got to pay taxes to the state, to the Fed. You might have to pay sales tax. Now, I'm a lawyer. I don't have there's no sales tax on my services, okay? This is because lawyers write the laws. They were almost going to put that on, and it got canned. But if you're selling, you know, toys, you've got to get a sales tax license, you got to collect tax, you got to get that all worked out, because they're going to come after you. They've been adding auditors at the Department of Revenue because they want to get every cent they can get. If you're going to pay people, you need to pay payroll tax, you got to withhold it, and then there's contractor issues. So if you're going to hire someone, some people try to hire people as a contractor, but they're not, they're really an employee. You can't just do whatever you want. There's laws, regulations, and those are things that should be worked out. Otherwise, if you don't, you may perhaps should have collected taxes and remitted taxes from the contractor who's really an employee, and you didn't, so now you got to pay penalties, and it's a big mess. So we talked about the competitive analysis. Very, very important. I look at about 5 factors to every business I look at that is kind of like the one I am analyzing. So those are, what do they do? Who's the key people? What are they mainly, what's their market? What are the gaps? And what are the opportunities for us? This will set us apart from them, and that can help drive the marketing. We're the only people that sell purple cows. Okay. All the marketing is going to have a purple cow in it. We do the SWOT analysis. What's so good about us? What's weak about us? Everybody's got weaknesses. Everybody's got strengths. What are the opportunities? What are the threats? Goes exactly what I looked at. I mean, the threats to my business are, there's all kinds of big law firms, and they take a lot of the business. Okay, that's kind of a threat. But it's also an opportunity because they charge a lot, and I can charge less. Marketing, I will leave to this gentleman. External communications in your business. Communication frequently brings down a business. So you have to figure out how you're going to communicate with your clients, your customers, your employees, and how they're going to communicate back to you. Don't miss a trick. And then doing business. This is a section that I always look at. What does a typical day, a week, month look like? How does money come in? What's our fee structure? How do we get the money in? How do we pay everyone else? And then operating, our day-to-day policies, procedures, all those things are part. We're going to sell something. Unless people just are breaking down your door, you got to figure out how to obtain clients now, next year, 10 years, and from 100 years. And it's going to vary over time. You still have to advertise many cases in this world. Some people don't, and they get all of their business from word of mouth. That's fine, but to some degree there's advertising involved also. You're going to hire people. Who's going to work for you? Who's going to do the work? You're going to do it all yourself? Good for you. If the business gets too big, you can't. You got to hire other people. You got to pay them wages, and you have to tell them what to do, train them. So all this should be thought about in advance. Depending on your complexity of your business, it's detailed, it's not detailed. A little bit about employees and contractors. If you're going to have employees, you've got to pay attention to these things, because also you'll get in trouble. These are regulatory things that are important if you have employees. And certainly a lot of new businesses, and especially nonprofits that I work with, get in trouble. So contracts, depending on what you got a lease. You talk about what you're going to need for that. Vendor things, you need cell phone contracts, other devices, document management. Who's going to do that? How does it all work? And then huge amount of technology things to talk about. I'm going to wrap up in 1 minute. And then I want to finish on intellectual property. This is the Brooklyn Bridge. So we all know that people like to sell the Brooklyn Bridge many times over. Now you can't do that with actual stuff, but you can do it with intellectual property. So I work with a lot of these things all the time, and certainly a lot of things people can sell. So if they've got like software, Microsoft invents software and then they sell it, the same software, 500 million times, and they make a lot of money. So there's contracts and things behind that to make sure no one steals it or uses it in an improper fashion, and to make sure they make money. So depending on what kind of business you have, you'll have intellectual property. It just depends on how much. So managing it, exploiting it, controlling it, very important. And then these are some of the things that are important then. And I'll leave insurance, but insurance is pretty cheap, but it's a good way to help you determine what kind of risks you have and how you should deal with it. And frequently, insurance is the answer. Or maybe you should shovel your sidewalk so no one slips, or both. And we have all kinds of insurances now, including home-based business insurance, which is its own policy, I guess, now. And I will leave it at that. And then future growth in a plan. How are you going to grow in the future? What's it going to look like? Do you want to grow? Maybe you don't. Some people don't. But if you do, you do. And then how do you get out of business? When do you fold? What's it look like? You've been struggling for 5 years. Are you unsuccessful? Should you do this? I don't know. But if we set a set of parameters, we have a good idea of what it looks like when you can say, okay, I don't have to fold, I'm successful, or yeah, this thing is tanking based on what I've projected. I've done everything I should do, I'm a failure. Okay, fine, I quit, start the next thing, and then I'm a big success. But we do need to know that, because otherwise you kind of die on the vine and it's kind of a painful situation. So from entry to exit, all of that in your business plan. And that's it. Thank you very much.